welcome to Above Replacement Radio. I am your host, Chris Gianta. You know what Christy Mathewson wasn't worried about? SIERA. When you're thinking about Pedro Ciriaco, I mean, the only one that can compete is maybe Hannes Wagner's 1908 season. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Kern.
Like, if we just clip together every time we've talked about him on other people's profiles, we've done a Mickey Cochran episode.
I can't get past Rabbit Marinville. It's not necessarily Hall of Fame. It's not necessarily above average, but we can guarantee you we are better than just the standard replacement level college sophomore.
And welcome to Above Replacement Radio. We're talking baseball kind of whenever, a little less frequently nowadays, but kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Gianta. Over there to my actual right, as you cannot see on YouTube, unfortunately, is Daniel Kern. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very well today. We're back. It's been, I think the last time we recorded was Hall of Fame,
yeah.
Which was just about a month ago now.
Yep.
It was January 25th. It was the live reaction. But we got a pretty exciting show for you guys today.
Very exciting, for sure.
We have another guest. We have current professor of journalism at Springfield College, also writer for Sports Illustrated, formerly at ESPN and MLB.com. We have Aimee Crawford. Aimee, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. It's great to be here.
So I guess where we'll start is we're going to take it back to July 29, 1989. The White Sox are coming off a walk-off loss to the California Angels. They are 43-60 with 20.5 games behind, and they're 20.5 games behind in the AL West race. But worst of all, Chicago has traded Harold Baines to the Texas Rangers. What is going through a young Aimee Crawford's mind?
You know, it's funny. As soon as you said that date, I knew exactly what you meant. Because that date is burned in my memory, in my young memory. So, as you both know, as you've heard from both of you who've been students in my sports writing class, Harold Baines is my favorite player of all time. I grew up a White Sox fan. I'm still a White Sox fan. Both of my children have been indoctrinated and are White Sox fans. And that was, I still would actually consider it one of the worst days of my life, because you guys know what it's like to have a hero of yours traded, and it just, I cried. I really did. I cried because he was, he had been with the team since I became a fan. And I don't know if I've told you guys the story of how I became a White Sox fan or not.
I don't recall.
It was in probably your opening presentation, but
I think I might have given you the condensed version of So we moved, my dad got transferred to Chicago, and we ended up living in Barrington, which is a northwest suburb. And this is probably hard for you guys to understand, but there was no internet, there was no Twitter. The only way I could keep up with the White Sox was listening to AM radio. And the only radio station that we got in my bedroom in my house in Barrington, Illinois was WMAQ, which was the White Sox flagship station and a country music station. So that's what I would listen to at night. And I started listening to games and I was already a baseball fan, but I became a White Sox fan because that was all of my friends who had apparently lived on the other side of town and got other radio stations were Cubs fans, but I became a White Sox fan, and learned a lot about country music, which also was not totally cool living in Chicago. But and Harold was my favorite player because he was like the quiet superstar. I mean, he wasn't a superstar, but he was like quiet, super productive, not showy, but at that point he wasn't yet a DH, but he was. Sure. He wasn't. He actually still played. He played right field at that point.
Those flagship stations can be funny. It can be the weirdest combination because I know in Connecticut, like there's no like sports talk radio for Connecticut, so there's like. For the Red Sox, it's News Talk 1080. It's like this. It's like a conservative talk radio, and then you have the Boston Red Sox at 7 p.m. And then for the Patriots, it's Rock 102.1. So when Baba O'Reilly is finished, you get the Patriots game, you get the Patriots pregame. It's those flagship stations are always they always give me the giggles for sure.
It's jarring.
Yeah.
Bit, yes.
It's interesting. Yeah, when we found out you were getting hired and I looked into your Twitter when I found out you were getting hired and I saw it like Harold Baines is my favorite player. I was like, Chris, we got to delete some footage.
Well, I'm sure we'll get to that. I know we've talked about this a little bit.
We
yes, the Harold Baines Hall of Fame question. I understand, but I can give you the perspective of, 12-year-old me, and who cried when he got traded, and then a journalist and a fan of advanced stats and someone who cares deeply about the Hall of Fame and who belongs and who doesn't, and that side of me understands why.
Yeah. I mean, like, I can probably be, like, my favorite player growing up was Dustin Pedroia, and, like, is he going to make the Hall of Fame? Probably not. Like, I think there's a slight chance, but ultimately I don't think it would happen. And, like, I think there would be a lot of people upset if he did make it, and, like, I don't know how I could completely disagree with them in that case, too. Like, he was my favorite player, and I would be so happy if he got in. But, like, I see that side of it as well.
One of our biggest collective sighs of relief, it was, I forget what day we were in your office, but you had the Harold Baines bobblehead, and you were like, but I know, it's not a, and we were like, oh, man.
We were like, we didn't want to be the ones to say it.
No, you would definitely not be the first people to say it.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was still working at ESPN, obviously, when he was inducted. And I remember getting the alert. Actually, it was a Sunday night, and I remember getting an alert that he had been elected.
Yeah.
And I was completely surprised by it. I think I think Harold Baines himself was surprised.
Yeah, there was a report that came out that he was like stunned. I was like, me too.
Which totally checks out. That's on brand for Harold Baines to not be.
Well, then you understand the appreciation for him as like the put his head down, hard working, just quiet type player. But you do mention you were working for ESPN. It makes me curious. Where were you working, and like what was kind of your general reaction when they finally won it in 2005? Because it's like you kind of had your fan hat off at that point for the most part.
Well, I did, and we've talked about that whole idea of checking your fandom when being an objective journalist, and I think I have mentioned that in classes with both of you, and that is important. I was working at Sports Illustrated at the time, and I was actually focused on I was not covering baseball. I was covering college basketball primarily and tennis. And so I also happened to be working with one of the most avid White Sox fans I know. We're few and far between outside Chicago, but Art Burke, who is a good friend and had worked for the White Sox, and at the time, in 2005, we were both working at Sports Illustrated. And he got to go to, I think he went to maybe more than one. I know he went to one of the World Series games in Chicago with his dad, who was a lifelong White Sox fan as well, which was a super cool moment. I had tickets to Game 6 of the 2005 World Series, and I'm sure I don't have to tell you guys, there was no Game 6 because it was a sweep, and they won in Houston. And I remember being really conflicted. I was, of course, thrilled that my favorite team, after a drought that was completely overshadowed.
88 years.
Yes, 88 years, completely overshadowed by the Cubs drought and the Red Sox drought.
Yeah.
We never.
Their drought was longer than the Red Sox.
Yeah.
Too, by a year.
Exactly.
Part of it was also that the Red Sox just got close very often.
Like
looking at the White Sox,
I'm pretty sure they had not.
History.
Like, I don't think they won a playoff series between 1917 and 2005.
Yeah. No, I mean obviously.
Which most of the time there was just the World Series.
Right.
Right.
In 1983, the winning ugly team. That was the first year that I was really invested in the team.
It's on Baines' Hall of Fame plaque.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, it should be. Yes. The winning ugly team. Yeah. I remember my sister and my mom and I, because I roped my sister into rooting for the White Sox. She wasn't quite as avid a baseball fan, but the way I would sort of torture her is I would make her memorize like the lineup or the starting rotation or read box scores back to me, which served her well in 2005 because she did actually have some,
Nice.
She had some like cultural knowledge of. She still likes baseball.
It's like the wax on, wax off thing.
Yes, exactly. It all came back to her.
Yeah.
But we celebrated the day that the White Sox were then, of course, in the American League West, and they clinched their playoff berth pretty early in September, and we celebrated that day. And then obviously their playoff run was short-lived, as was, and then in 1993, I was actually studying. I was an exchange student living in Paris, and I almost didn't go because I was so sure that the White Sox were going to win the World Series, or at least make the playoffs at that point, that I told my parents there was, no streaming, no real internet. Mm-hmm. So I would go to a payphone and call home and have my mom play the broadcast for a while to listen, and then obviously again a short-lived run, so I didn't miss a World Series championship.
Right.
But they lost to a good team that year, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that was
that offense.
Right. And then 1994 would have been. I know that would have been the White Sox year, but it wasn't.
Expos fans beg to differ.
True. True.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. Yeah, they were first in the newly AL Central at 67 and 46. But yeah, they eventually get there in like a oddly dominant fashion too. They went 11-1 in the playoffs, which is it's pretty crazy to do, especially with a team that wasn't exactly star-studded. Like, I'm looking at their wins above replacement leader for that year was Mark Burley. He had 4.8, which is that's not even probably top 10 in the league. So it is funny how they kind of got that. I guess they did get it in the White Sox sort of way, because they are the second team in the city, so they kind of go under the radar. And the same way the Curse went under the radar, they had a lot of under the radar players that were able to get it done. I
don't think people realize just how crazy good that team was. They went wire to wire. They were in first every single day throughout the entire season. They lost one playoff game.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they get virtually no recognition.
Nope.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you guys remember who the MVP of that series was?
Of the World Series? No, it wasn't Joe Creedy. Was it?
Jermaine Dye.
It was Jermaine Dye, because he had the hit in Game 4. It was a 1-0 game.
Yep.
Should have been a Jeff Blum. The dude got one. That guy got one plate appearance in the World Series. It was a 14th inning home run in Game 3.
Per plate appearance, he was the best player in that.
The 5,000 OPS
in that World Series. So you did mention that in 05 you weren't really covering baseball at that point. What points did you kind of have the fan hat on? What points did you kind of have the fan hat off?
Well, I felt my dream. I wrote this in my diary or something when I was in middle school, I think, was to grow up and become a White Sox beat reporter. That's what I thought my dream job would be. And then it sort of evolved. I majored in both journalism and French in college, and then I mentioned that I was studied in France. And so then I decided maybe I would use both of my degrees. I told my advisors that I would go to Montreal and cover the Expos, but then obviously that didn't work out.
Yeah.
So once I graduated from my first job out of graduate school was working for the Sporting News, which was known throughout much of its history as the Bible of baseball. Based in St. Louis, had covered baseball, was at that point more than 100 years old. The focus by then had changed. It was no longer just covering baseball, but baseball was still very important, and everybody who worked there loved baseball, and it was such a great baseball city. And I realized once I got there and I started pitching ideas and story ideas that, I had to sort of check that fandom. Everybody knew I was a White Sox fan, of course, and everybody, as we've talked about in class, most of us who become sports journalists do so because we love sports and we grew up passionately rooting for teams. So, of course, that informs, how you think about it and helps you understand why people care and why people want to read and listen. But I did definitely, consciously take a step back, and I didn't just pitch White Sox story ideas, for example, because nobody would have, especially, 96 or 97. That wasn't really going to fly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely, at the points where I was covering baseball, I was conscious of the fact that you can't. There's no cheering in the press box and no cheering in the when you're pitching story ideas in the editors meeting either. So.
Yeah. So, and what in your time at the Sporting News, this was probably like one of the highlights of our knowledge of you. Is you mentioned casually in Daniel's first sports writing class.
The first day that I met you.
Yeah, first day. What we know now is you sat in on an interview with Stan Musial and Tony Gwynn. For context, those listening, Stan Musial, 4th on the all-time hit list, 331 lifetime hitter, 976 career OPS. Tony Gwynn, 338 lifetime hitter, also member of the 3,000 hit club. Two of the greatest, you can agree, two of the greatest pure hitters ever.
Yeah.
And you got to sit in on an interview with the both of them. I want to know everything about everything you remember from that interview, because that is so fascinating.
I'm sorry. I know that was a bit of a flex, but I mean, it was and it wasn't, because I had nothing to do with bringing them together. It was my first year working there. I was just lucky enough.
But being able to be in the same room, is like an honor in its own right.
It was, and I think a bunch of us all tried to, working with all these people who were baseball fans and fans of baseball history, and understood how cool it was to have two of the greatest hitters in baseball history together. I think they sat there, I think it was like 2 hours, and they talked about, everything, bat speed, dominant hand, like which, like reading breaking balls, like it was just like all of this like really nitty gritty, fascinating. It's just the working you got to see like the inner workings of their brains about hitting, and it was just incredibly cool. And what I thought was especially cool was seeing Tony Gwynn, how excited he was to get to
that's
talk
just
to
how
us.
he was.
Right. Yeah, he was a student of the game.
Yeah.
And so he appreciated that he was getting. It wasn't just we were bringing them together for a story. It was Tony Gwynn was as excited as anybody else about the opportunity to talk to one of the greatest hitters ever.
Especially so cool that like these are two of the best hitters of all time, but they also played in such different eras. Like one of them, like many people might remember watching Tony Gwynn play. A handful of people today probably have any memories of watching Stan Musial, and like watching, seeing both of them together, like talking about the same thing like that. That's something really special. Yeah,
like I think Musial was probably in the box for Carl Hubble, and Gwynn saw Pedro.
John Smoltz, yeah.
Yeah, Pedro Martinez. Was there any did you see any differences in the way they kind of talked about hitting?
Well, I remember they talked about who, they asked each other the toughest pitchers they ever played, who they faced, and obviously they were from different eras.
Right.
And they also talked about who, they would, the players they most liked to watch. And I think they both named, at that time, Ken Griffey Jr., which is not,
yeah,
not an unpopular. I'm sure, you could survey many people
in 1997.
Yeah. So, I thought, and they also talked. I remember this too about that. That was a season. Tony Gwynn, I think, was, he was on a quest to hit 400, and I think I remember him talking also about that the pressure really weighed on him. That he felt this as I'm sure it has for any of the other players who come close. But yeah, I do remember that the shared appreciation for Junior. And
it seems appropriate that you mentioned that Gwynn had such an appreciation, because if you look at the video of Ted Williams being carted out at Fenway in the 1999 All-Star game for the All-Century team, Gwynn was one of the most engaged people out there, and really just appreciating every moment. And you could just tell he was such an appreciator of baseball history, and everyone that came before him.
Yes.
Yeah.
You met when Chris had to step out for a second earlier. You mentioned another story about meeting Stan Musial.
Yes. So my first day, I got this job after I graduated. I got my master's degree, and I got to start working at the Sporting News, and I was part of a group. We had been hired because the Sporting News, after being a print publication for 100 plus years, was starting a website. So I was one of the 4 editors that they brought in to help digitize, and create this online presence. And the first day I started, my boss asked me, I have an extra ticket. Tonight is the baseball, the St. Louis baseball writers, dinner and reception. Would you like to go? And I was like, oh, yes, of course. And so that night, the St. Louis baseball writers it's a very, obviously, St. Louis still is and always has been a great baseball city.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty vibrant chapter. It's pretty interesting. And I remember we went to this reception, walked in. The first person I met was Bob Costas. And then Stan Musial was one of the other people. I met him briefly. He was mobbed, as you can imagine, by a bunch of different people. But I was like, wow, is this what it's going to be like every day? I'm just going to show up for work and then go meet Stan Musial and Bob Costas. And then I do remember, they give out awards, and then Stan Musial got up on stage and started playing harmonica, which apparently is a Stan Musial. He was also known for that, and he just played and then kept playing and played for a while. He's Stan Musial. Nobody's going to tell him it's time.
Stan Musial in St. Louis,
right.
That I can't imagine. That's just that's like Tom Brady in Foxborough.
Right.
It's like Stan Musial in St. Louis. He could do literally whatever he wanted.
He could, including play harmonica for 25 minutes. But it was thoroughly entertaining. But it was funny, I think it went on a little longer than I expected it to. But
that's hilarious.
Who's gonna tell him no?
Right.
You
I'm not
can't.
gonna tell him no. No one's gonna play him off the stage.
No one wants to do that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think, not even Bob Gibson or Ozzie Smith.
Bob Gibson probably would have.
Yeah,
if he was there.
Yeah.
He'd be like, all right, guy, listen.
Yep.
It's like, right. let's meet 60 feet 6 inches away. If I strike you out, you put down that harmonica. Okay, so now let's go to the state of baseball today. First of all, what are you thinking about the state of the White Sox?
The state of the White Sox, I feel pretty good about baseball. Last season, the expectations were really high. It was a little bit, obviously disappointing not to see. I honestly thought they were a World Series caliber team. I am, I guess, perplexed that it's funny to me that the guy who was managing the team when I was a kid is now back with the team. So I still don't understand the Tony Lewis, the dynamic there. And there were definitely points last season where I really thought it was all going to implode. And it's a young, exciting team with so much, personality, and so which seems to run counter to Tony Lewis and his style and his ethos. But I don't.
Exactly, yeah.
They also, they dealt with so many injuries, too.
Right.
Eloy and Luis Robert both going down before the start of the season. That was really tough. And Robert came back and had a 155 OPS plus in 68 games. He played extremely well. Also cut down the strikeouts. Grandal went down for some time. I think Tim Anderson missed some time. Right. They were throwing out some weird lineups in August, and they were still winning games too.
Mm-hmm.
I think if that team was healthier throughout the whole season, we could have seen a lot more.
Yeah, and Daniel and I agreed when this hiring happened. The White Sox are in a position to succeed for 5+ years, and they hired a manager where you don't know if he's going to be there for 5 years.
Right.
It was the weirdest thing for sure.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I think this is much like Harold Baines being inducted into the Hall of Fame through the the Veterans Committee, right?
The Today's Game era.
Today's
committee.
Game era. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
And the person who had the biggest role, at least from what I understand, was Jerry Reinsdorf.
Yes.
And I feel like
There was also like a former teammate, a former GM. Like there was
Yes.
a couple
lots of fans
conflict of interest in there.
of Harold Baines in the room. And so I obviously think this is another example of Jerry Reinsdorf returning to, someone he knows and loves from that era. I don't know. I know we've talked about this in class before, and we did watch, last semester we watched one of the episodes of The Last Dance.
Mm-hmm.
But that it struck me when I watched that. You see Jerry Reinsdorf, obviously, in his capacity as owner of the Bulls, but he, is a guy who is very loyal to the people he loves. And I guess that sort of helped me understand why he's hiring Tony La
I just feel bad for Rick Hahn.
Yeah.
Like, he spent years developing that farm system. He was praised as a GM for building the team of the future. And, like, the time finally came, and to my knowledge, nobody else in the room wanted that. I think all the reports were like, the front office didn't want it, Rick Hahn didn't want it.
It was a very curious hire.
Yeah.
I just, like you said, it doesn't really make sense with the makeup of the team and the direction. And like you said, Chris, like the fact that they have this 5-year window, and now you have a, not to be ageist, but
Right.
79-year-old. So yeah,
I mean, given the direction of manager hirings, like, it was definitely outside the box.
Right.
Like in today's game.
Yeah, and I should say I don't think his age was the issue at all. It's
No, I
simply
think it's the mindset.
that-
Like, the Mets just hired Buck Showalter, and a lot of people were giving out the same comments, and it's like, Buck actually, like, if you go behind the scenes, like, he's very much, like, he has the mind of a 45-year-old who's getting hired today, like Alex Cora, or like, I know, Rocco Baldelli, Kevin Cash.
Yeah.
Like, he's, like, a lot of people will remind you, like, 5 years ago he didn't put Zach Britton in the wild card game. And, like, yeah, that was bad, but, like, that was one instance.
Yeah.
And
Reminds me of Connie Mack.
Oh, my goodness. Do you at all remember watching Game 2 of that division series last year?
Yes.
Yeah. Was it early afternoon or?
It was early. It was the first game of the 4-game Friday.
Yeah, there might have been
was.
some classes going on during then, but the
Yeah.
broadcast was so bad and so good at the same time.
It was It was Jim Cott, Buck Showalter, and
Bob Costas.
Bob Costas, and they were name dropping. Connie Mack.
I might still have the notes of the people they listed.
There was one moment where I think Yohan Moncada was up, and they were talking about, like, him being a switch hitter because, like, the Astros had taken a righty out, put a lefty in, and, he had switched sides of the box. And I was like, Chris, watch this. They're gonna mention Mickey Mantle. And they mentioned Ted Simmons instead, which I was
A more niche player.
a way more niche player.
Recently elected into the Hall of Fame. Yeah, I still have it on my phone.
Yeah.
Astros White Sox broadcast. The header says Astros White Sox broadcast names mentioned, and it was Brooks Robinson, Sparky Anderson, Burt Blyleven, Ted Simmons, Bob Uecker, Connie Mack. And that was only through the middle of the fifth.
Wow.
we switched to the
Brewers Braves game because we were like, I can't, like, the game was.
So that wasn't even the Brewers game, and they're mentioning
Yeah.
Ted Simmons and
Bob Uecker
Bob Uecker.
as a player too.
As a player, yeah.
Not
yeah,
even as a
not the
broadcaster.
broadcaster.
Not the broadcaster who's still going to this day.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
Way to connect with the,
anytime we mention Buck Showalter, that will be mentioned because it was too good. And I do plan because on MLB.tv you can watch games back from last year. I do plan on eventually putting
that one
myself
up.
through the last half of the game so I can
couldn't take
so I
it.
can get some more spicy name drops.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else we want to ask before we get to the question we ask now all of our guests?
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about that question.
I forgot
another
about that
thing.
until
Another
now.
thing that you've mentioned, just like places you've been around baseball. You were at. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you were at the game where Mark McGwire hit his 62nd home run of the '98 season.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was.
Did you know this?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I haven't mentioned that.
You mentioned it to me.
Yes. So, I was working at the Sporting News. It was a
Yep.
crazy season. It's really interesting to revisit that now, knowing what we know. At the time, it was super. Yeah, it was. baseball was coming back from the strike.
Yeah.
This was
Yeah.
the narrative around Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa on the home run chase was that they were, saving baseball.
Right.
And it certainly felt like that, living in St. Louis, being part of that. One of the really wonderful perks as a fan, too, was the Sporting News had tickets that, we could, as staff members, like we got our turn. You get a
Right,
rotation, so you
yeah.
go. And then at that point, bleacher seats at Busch Stadium, the old Busch Stadium, were like $5. So I probably went to, 20, 25 games that summer because, it was like affordable and I could, and then every once in a while I get to go for free. And as McGwire got closer, it was over a weekend. And I remember I went to a couple of the games as a fan, and then it worked out that we had an extra press credential for the night that he he was sitting at. I saw him hit 61 on Labor Day, I think. And as a fan, I was there with my mom, actually. And the night of 62, I was there actually covering it as a member of the media. And my assignment was to, try to find, if he hit it, to find the person who caught it. Because I was younger and faster and and you guys remember, you've seen the home run. It's a line drive over the left field wall into the bullpen. And everybody was like, well, how do we find where did it go? And then I was, I remember sprinting, and then somebody, I don't know how we found out that it was one of the groundskeepers, Tim Forneris, who had caught it. And so that was my big, contribution to our coverage that night, is I found him and interviewed him. And I remember him saying, oh, I'm going to give the ball back to him. And I remember sort of pausing and thinking, ask him for something first. Yeah. But, because he was like an assistant groundskeeper. So he wasn't, somebody who made a ton of money, but he did work for the ball club. And I think he felt, and then they had a ceremony afterwards where he presented him with the ball, and he did end up getting, I think, some merchandise.
I think that is a solid move to act like you don't want anything, because you'll get a little bit of compensation.
Yeah.
I know, but
especially for that one, that's not just
right.
a guy in September coming up from the minors and hitting his first home run. That's Mark McGwire hitting the 62nd home run of the season.
Well, and if you look at some of the paydays that subsequent home run, milestone home run balls drew. I mean, he did. I actually pitched a story idea because I really wanted to follow up with him on the anniversary, follow up with Tim Forneris himself, who became an assistant DA, I think. But never. I think he still actually works for the Cardinals.
I was gonna say, do you know where he is now?
He is. He's still in St. Louis, and he still works for the Cardinals. And I had pitched this story idea, and for whatever reason, I think it didn't resonate with people. I think some of it is, the people take a very, we don't look at it as quite as a celebratory moment in baseball history in the way now that we know.
We know everything.
And so I think I had a different perspective because I was there, and it was it felt like, momentous. And I mean, it still was. It was still very cool. But I couldn't really convince my editors, my bosses at the time, hey, people will really like this story. But ESPN ended up doing a documentary. Have you guys seen the
Long Gone Summer?
Long Gone Summer,
It was
so he's in there a little bit.
It was the only baseball thing to look forward to.
Because it was
at
June
that
of 2020.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
2020. What a year.
So, yeah.
Do you have any other big baseball events that you were at that you have a memory of?
Well, when I was working for MLB.com, I covered the 2002 All-Star Game, the infamous tie.
That was the Milwaukee one?
Yes, in Milwaukee when it ended in a tie, and that's why we had the, the World Series home field advantage came out of that game, basically because they ran out of pitchers, which was bizarre. I remember us being there, trying to figure out what was happening, and whether or not this was. I've heard some people theorize that it was because they were trying to, meaning I don't know if it was the players or whatever, were kind of trying to stick it to Bud Selig in his home park. I'm not sure that's actually true. I think it honestly just
it's an all-star game.
Was it the first year that the All-Star game decided home field advantage?
It was because of that.
It was so it became a thing in 2003.
Right. They wanted something. They wanted
an incentive for people to win.
An incentive, right? Yeah, for people for the game to mean something.
So if Torrey Hunter didn't rob that home run, that could have never been a thing.
Yeah.
If Torrey Hunter didn't rob a home run in 2002, the Cubs could have won Game 7 of the World Series at Wrigley.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah, funny how that works out. It did feel like a bit of an overcorrection. To you know, I get it. Like you want the game to be competitive, but also I don't know. You know, I don't.
It's weird, yeah.
It was weird. It was weird to experience.
It is fun. Like we're gonna look back at that 20 years from now and think, "Wow, what a mistake."
Yes.
What a
So
mistake.
like, what were the highlights like for you from covering that game?
I don't actually remember a lot from that game.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it, and I think I've talked to you guys about that. Usually, when I've been on, I've covered a couple of World Series, and usually in a role as an editor where I was on site sort of coordinating coverage.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it was just sort of deciding, okay, you're going to go, you're, for example, I think I have talked about one of the greatest series I've ever covered was the 2001 World Series.
Yeah.
And for so many reasons, and I lived in New York at the time, and there was just, it was not just from a baseball perspective, but because of, coming after 9/11 and being in New York. But it was really stressful because, again, like I was not there as a fan. I wasn't rooting. I was rooting for the story, as we say.
Mm-hmm.
And the story in so many of those games changed in the final at bat, which is great when you're watching as a fan. Really stressful when you're a writer who is just, either you're writing on deadline and you've already got your story done, or you're an editor, helping plan all that coverage. And I remember being on Game 7 in Arizona. We had a plan in place. We knew who was writing the Yankees win story because, of course, Mariano Rivera was coming in the bottom of the ninth inning and like, well, this game's over.
Yeah.
And then Luis Gonzalez hits that little bloop. And I was actually standing outside of the Yankees clubhouse. Obviously, the players weren't in there yet, but a lot of their family members were. And I remember just seeing some of the, family members crying.
Yeah.
Because it just, and I remember being like, no, this isn't the way it's supposed to go. It just felt weird. The Diamondbacks weren't supposed to win. The Yankees were supposed to win.
Yeah.
And that's the stories we had. So it was actually, I remember running around and having to, we had to sort of reframe the stories and decide who was writing. I mean, we had a contingency plan in place,
Were you like still in the locker room when the players had to come off the field after that?
No, I was not,
Okay.
because I actually ended up going, I think, back up to the press box. So I wasn't, because we had
Okay.
writers. I think actually maybe I didn't have, my credential may not have been, because I wasn't reporting on,
Sure.
I didn't have clubhouse access for that one. But every game was like that. The games in Yankee Stadium, like Derek Jeter's home run. I remember coming home after that series, and my husband said, "Wow, that was one of the most exciting World Series ever." And I was like, it was, And now...
Was it that good?
I was just like, I don't know, I'm so tired. But then, I've had some time to process it and actually sit back and watch the highlights, and it's fun. I still love actually reliving that series. Although seeing that hit, I think I showed you guys in class, seeing that bloop single still gives me, still stresses me out.
Yeah, I'm realizing now how David versus Goliath it was. The Yankees had won the World Series in every year of the Diamondbacks' existence prior
That's
to that.
true.
Yeah.
I've never thought about it from that
I
angle.
never
Yeah.
thought, I just realized, like, oh yeah, the Yankees had won a lot. Oh wait, they won every single year
Right.
in their existence.
all
up to
all
that
Arizona
point.
baseball fans had ever known was the Yankees eventually win.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and then Gonzalez with the, well, there was an error. There was a Tony Womack double.
Yep, there
And
was
there was
the
a-
Tony. Well,
Right.
Mark Grace led off with a single, and there was a bunt which went into center field. Then there was another bunt that got the out of third base, and then Womack doubled, and then Craig Counsell, that poor guy, got hit by a pitch.
Mm-hmm.
He had second and third with one out, like the greatest opportunity, and he gets hit by a pitch to load the bases.
Right. And yet, we still,
Yeah.
almost everybody probably watching and even in the stadium there still thought, well,
Mm-hmm.
here comes, Mariano
Yeah.
Rivera.
Exactly.
It's over.
Exactly.
Craig Counsell just like has a thing for being in those games because he played for the '97 Marlins.
For the
too.
Marlins, yeah.
Right. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but MLB Network did a documentary about the 90s Cleveland Indians, and there was footage, like unseen footage, from the locker room during the 9th inning of Game 7 when Jose Mesa came in and blew the lead. And, like, I want to say it was Bip Roberts went down to the bathroom, like, before the inning started, and, like, they already had, like, all the walls were taped up, like, they had the champagne, they had the trophy wheeled in, and he had to see all of it and then go out and play the 9th inning. And then, obviously, all that went the way that it did.
No, I have not seen that. Oh.
That is, yeah.
That's brutal.
It's a gut punch, for sure. All right, well... So now we get into the question that we're now asking all of our guests. So I'm sure, at least from listening to our podcast a few times, you're familiar with StatCast. You understand, you understand what it measures and things of that nature. So if you were to go back in time and retrieve one player's complete career StatCast stats and kind of where they compare to the rest of the league, what player would that be?
Well, can it be someone who didn't actually play in the major leagues?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay,
yeah,
so I would say Josh Gibson.
That's a great answer.
I don't know if anybody's ever said Josh Gibson before, but
I'm number 8 on my list of top 10, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. So obviously I don't have to explain to you guys who Josh Gibson was, but I've just always been fascinated by, if you know baseball history, if you watch Ken Burns' documentary, that's where I learned a lot about Josh Gibson and, like, the legacy and the lore, like, all that. He was just, shrouded in myth, and there are all these stories about him and his, that he hit these, home runs, these, like, epic home runs, and that so many other Hall of Famers or, sort of guys like Satchel Paige, who did actually play with him, talk about. But as you know, the Negro League statistics are incomplete.
Yeah.
So there's no actual, we only know a small percentage of what his actual stats were. And I think his Hall of Fame plaque, he is in the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
But says he hit, like, more than 800 home runs.
There's a lot of myths out there about it, which, we'll never really be able to truly know. And yeah, I think StatCast data would definitely give us a much better idea.
He did. I actually have a Pittsburgh Crawford's jersey.
Oh, nice.
That's my. But I know he was actually. I think he played more of his career with the Homestead Grays. But yeah, I just think he would be. But I also have. I'm also fascinated by. Are you guys familiar with Tony Stone or Mamie Johnson or Connie Morgan?
Not particularly.
I can't believe I haven't talked to you guys about this. So there are 3 women who played. There are 3 women who actually played in the Negro Leagues. Tony Stone was the first, and she replaced Hank Aaron with the Indianapolis Clowns. So she was an infielder. Mamie Johnson, I believe, was a pitcher, and then Connie Morgan played with after, I think, Tony Stone. They didn't all play together, but they played in subsequent years in the 50s, which I just think is so fascinating. And again, there's a really good woman named Martha Ackman wrote a really great biography of Tony Stone that gets into a lot of the history and talks about how, there's so much we don't know because it wasn't just true of these women. It wasn't really
kept.
Right, they just, like, they weren't covered like, other professional teams were, so we don't have all these accurate, we don't even have game stories for a lot of it, or certainly not stats, but I think there should be a movie, by the way. I think there should be a movie about the 3 of them playing against 3 women of color playing professional baseball in the 50s. Like, I want that movie. There's actually a scene, you guys have seen A League of Their Own.
I have not, actually. Yeah.
I haven't watched it in a while, but yeah, I've watched it.
That is, yeah, you need to watch it.
I for sure have to.
It is a baseball movie that stands the test of time and in so many ways. But there's actually a scene in A League of Their Own where Gina Davis's character, I can't remember, somebody overthrows the ball and a black woman picks up the ball. And Gina Davis kind of motions like, here, you can toss it to me. And she throws, just fires it. She's got a cannon and fires it over her head to like Madonna's character or something. And it's actually that really happened. That Toni Stone went to a tryout for the All-American Girls Professional League, and the league, much like, Major League Baseball, did not allow black players. So
Right.
she was not able to, she didn't, even though she clearly was good enough to play with men of her era, wasn't allowed to play because it was segregated. She couldn't play. So I've always thought that scene would be the great opening scene for the movie about Toni Stone.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
fascinating. I had no idea.
I'm glad
I
I
was
could
not
share
made aware of that.
Yeah, and I think a movie would definitely shed light on it for sure.
Mhm.
Get people more excited about it. Well, thank you very much for joining us. It was a
My
pleasure to get more extensive knowledge on what you've done and the experiences you've had. Amazing to talk to you. It was a pleasure having you on. And that will do it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio.
Goes a month without the show, forgets its name.
Yeah, Above Replacement Radio. If you're listening, or if you want to follow us on social media, follow me on Twitter at Chris_Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_current, and follow the show on Instagram at Above Replacement Radio for all the show needs. Aimee, any social media shout outs for you?
Aimee J. Crawford. It's AIMEEJ CRAWFORD.
Yeah.
I'm not as exciting a follow as either of you, but I
Nice.
will.
Well, I think
I don't know
I
about
think
that.
you are. I
Yeah.
think you are.
Thank you.
I enjoy.
I promise I don't just tweet about the White Sox.
It's definitely quality over quantity,
Yeah.
for sure. All right, so that will do it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio, and we will see you at some point in the future. We don't know when. Hopefully when this lockout is over, and hopefully that's sooner rather than later.
Yes.
Negotiations are going on today.
Yeah.
Actually, to my knowledge, I haven't checked Twitter in a while, obviously, but I know the meeting started at 1. I have not seen any reports of it being over to right now.
Awesome. All right.
It's a break. Evan Drellick just tweeted there's a break right now.
All right. Well,
Hour and a half in, and we're still going.
All right. So maybe it'll be sooner rather than later. But anyway,
hope.
we will see you then.
This conversation is over.